Josh and Frankie.
What a couple of dumb shits.
Hello, Primates! You found Primus Tracks. Congratulations! Find us on the wonderful World Wide Web at Primus Tracks on Instagram and Twitter. Primus Tracks Pod at gmail.com is the email address. There's a Facebook page run by the one and only Frankie Berestein, who's right over there in Primus Tracks Towers.
Hi, Josh. Hi, patrons.
Speaking of patrons, patreon.com/Primus Tracks is a website you should only go to if you actually want to hear and see more of us. Quite a number of people that want to, and I worry for them. Today we are going back in time, Frankie, to talk about Primus side projects, and we're actually going to talk about the first technical Primus side project, Blind Illusion. This actually predates Larry and Tim Alexander making their way into the band. Les Claypool, of course, was running Primus with Todd Huth and Jay Lane in 1987, and they were starting to gather steam. But he took a little time away to join, for a brief period, rejoin, I should say, a band called Blind Illusion. We're going to talk about the band, its history, many familiar names that have graced the Blind Illusion name over time. And we're going to talk about their first record, 1988's The Sane Asylum. That was the only Blind Illusion record until recently, Frankie. There have been a couple releases in the past decade, actually. So, band's still around. Mark Biederman's still doing his thing.
And I just remembered, Josh, that there's a particular clip on YouTube of Blind Illusion where you can see Les playing a bass solo. I'm sure you're familiar with the video.
Yes, actually, there are plenty of clips of Blind Illusion playing some live shows back in, I want to say, 87, 88, that have been digitized. And I believe many of them by Mark Biederman, founder and lead guitarist of Blind Illusion, who has quite a presence on YouTube. And he definitely made sure to get a video of many performances from back then. And you can see Les in all his shirtless glory, playing bass solos and rocking out. And you can see Larry's hair, and that's about it. But it's really great footage, and it might be worth your time to look up. Frankie, are you a Blind Illusion guy at all? I'm sure you've listened to this record at some point.
Yes, but I confess myself pretty ignorant on Blind Illusion.
Now, I would say this was into my wheelhouse because the first music I got into, as I've said before, beyond Disney soundtracks, was metal. I know that's a strange thing, a strange connection, or a strange path to take, but that was mine. And thrash metal really spoke to me when I was about 13, and as puberty was really kicking in for me, it really spoke to me. So I glommed onto it, especially the big four: Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, Slayer. But there were some other bands that really caught my attention too, like Sepultura, Testament, Exodus to a degree. So I'm not as steeped in it as I once was, but I certainly got a good start. But Blind Illusion, we're going to see a lot of connections here to some names that would be familiar in the metal world, and I think you'll see why it stands up as its own metal record here. Primates, I'm happy to give you a little path here. I actually subtitled this, Frankie, Blind Illusion, Les meets Ler. So we're going to take a look at how these two guys get together via this band. And we also, to preface it here, have a Primus Mystery of the Week, but I'm going to call it the Primus Mystery of the Year. And when I get there, Frankie's going to take over. This band was founded by Mark Biederman in 1978 while he was a student at De Anza High School. Sound familiar, Frankie?
Totally.
Some stalwart names came out of De Anza High in those years. Now, Mark first got Les and Kern to be in the band with him, and that's how they started out. Now, Les was in and out of the band for many years as he discovered more artists. I'm going to lean heavily on the Over Electric Grapevine book by Greg Prado, which, by the way, you can now pre-order in paperback from Club Bastardo. So please support Greg. Please support the band. So they talk a lot in the beginning about Blind Illusion. Les said he was just really didn't know how to play much on the bass, so he was learning these songs as he worked with Mark on creating many of these songs. And what's interesting about this record, Frankie, it was recorded in 87, released in 88, but Biederman kind of time-stamped the songs. So some of these he wrote in 79, 83. They span quite a long frame of time, and Les actually has a songwriting credit on one track, and we'll sample that one later. But as Les developed his interests more, he discovered guys like Stanley Clarke and Larry Graham. This is straight from the book, the Pareto book. That led him to seek out more opportunities, and he ended up working a lot with the Tommy Crank Band and eventually founding Primate, which of course became Primus.
Filipino Ray.
And that's where Ray Wing enters the picture. And of course, we'll talk about old Filipino Ray down the line, you bet. Is that one your favorite from that record? Because you love to talk about Filipino Ray.
Oh, the bass on that track is crazy. And I do recall that we talked about it with Gabby, right? That it's a crazy hard song to play live.
That's right. Speaking of crazy hard bass, Blind Illusion right here. Boy, Les talked about the intricate and difficult bass lines that he was creating for some of these tracks, or that were written by Mark Biederman for him to play. And he called it quite a challenge, especially leaving the band and coming back to relearn these tracks. He found it difficult, but also really fun and challenging. And he really has nothing but good things to say about Mark and his experience in that band. Because they did get to tour, and they got to record a studio record, and I think Les probably learned a lot in the process. Blind Illusion made numerous demos between 79 and 87, many of them with Les. Some of them, Frankie, were produced by their old De Anza High classmate, a guy by the name of Kirk Hammett, who you might be familiar with. So we're going to pick up in 1987. After another lineup change, Blind Illusion, I guess, infamous at this point for numerous lineup changes. Larry actually jokes in the book that if you were a guitar player or played any instrument in the Bay Area at some point in the 80s, you were in that band. He's no exception. So we're going to pick up in 87. Larry joins Blind Illusion after doing some work with Possessed and Blizzard, his high school band. And speaking of Blizzard, his pal, the drummer Mike Miner, had joined Blind Illusion. And Larry ended up playing guitar in that band as well. So Larry's in the fold. And then at some point, Mark Biederman gets funding for a record. He calls Les and he says, "Hey, come on down, rejoin the band. We're going to make an album and you're going to get a free bass amp out of it." And Frankie, I just said Les's favorite 4-letter word. Free. How could he say no? So Les says, "Hey, all right, I'll rejoin you guys for a little bit. I got this Primus thing going on, but to make the record, he only had to be in there every so often. So he could still keep the Primus thing going. He could still gig outside of Blind Illusion and make some things happen for himself. I think at that point, too, he had said that Mark was in complete control as far as creativity, as far as what the recording was going to be like, and the tunes they were going to use. And this is where Les, for many years now, has said, "I was a hired gun." And I think he used those exact words with us when he appeared on the podcast. Is that right, Frankie? Does that serve your memory?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, speaking of those lineup changes, Brian Kehoe, Adam Gates, among others, had stints in Blind Illusion. I remember Adam picked up the bass for a tour to support this record, I believe. Kehoe was in and out as a guitar player, too. So the previous bass player departs, Les rejoins, and I think Larry and Les meet in Blind Illusion. And one thing that Ler said is when he first met Les, and this is straight from the book, he said he appreciated that Les, to paraphrase, didn't look the part of a guy who would be in a metal band. The detail he gave was that Les was wearing different colored shoes. Probably wasn't wearing leather or anything like that either. So at that point, he was being himself, even though he's in this metal band. But I think they also shared this mindset of pushing musical boundaries, having fun, and wanting to be ultimately be creative. For those of you watching on Patreon video, in case you want to see a bass player who doesn't look the part of being in a metal band, on the back of your record sleeve, you can see all these sketches of the band members, probably based on photography. And there's Les right there with the Carl Thompson in the middle. He's got the hat on. He's got the just a t-shirt. I mean, he looks like a sweaty metal guy, but he just doesn't look like a metal dude, you know? Leather jackets, crazed look in his eye, hair flying everywhere. He actually kind of looks like a normal guy, especially compared to the other three. I don't know about you, Frankie, but I never really envisioned Les as a metal dude. He just looks like he should be out fishing.
Exactly.
He's got his aesthetic even back then. Even though he's gallivanting around, you know, shirtless because he's got the body to do so back then in the 80s, he's still, you know, it's sweaty work, too, especially in those tiny clubs. Blech, I wouldn't wear a shirt either. They're gigging in 87. Biederman gets some funding for a record, calls Les, come on down. I got a bass amp for you. We're going to cut this album. The Sane Asylum is recorded from May to July 1987 at Hyde Street Studios in San Francisco. So early 87, we know the Sausage demo doesn't come out till 88. But we do know at this point that Primus is gathering some momentum. And as Soya has told us, once that Sausage demo hit, that's when things really picked up. So we're getting close in the timeline. Mark Biederman is in complete creative control. He produced it, mixed it. The credits of the album say all the arrangements are credited to him. Some of the songwriting is not, or I should say, some of the songwriting has co-credits, like the track Death Noise, which Les has a co-credit on. But Mark Biederman, he's the guy. And so this is where Les is a hired gun. But there's an uncredited producer by the name, once again, of Kirk Hammett. So Kirk Hammett, fresh off Master of Puppets and that world tour, this is actually 6, 7, 8 months after the death of Cliff Burton. So Metallica taking a bit of a break, finding a new bass player, and I believe 87 saw them create the Garage Days Revisited or Revisited or one of those. So they're on a bit of a break, and Hammett actually has time to hang out with these guys as they make this record. Now, in the book, Larry says that Kirk wasn't around too much, and he also says, I don't know how much producing he actually did, which is pretty funny to me, but he's there, which tells me he was probably mostly their financial backer. That's my guess. So he gets to hang out with his old high school buddies while they're making a record. Plus, you know, Ler's around, and he's a good time. Ler and Les both said that they were in and out, recording their guitar parts, recording their bass parts, and then on with their lives. But Biederman was there for quite some time with recording, mixing, and all these other things that go into making a record because he had his hand on everything, which makes sense. It's his band. It's noteworthy, because I'm going to turn it over to Frankie in a moment. It's noteworthy that at Hyde Street Studios there in 87, Blind Illusion is recording, and the next room over or somewhere in another studio room, Blue Oyster Cult is also recording. They're making their next record. Cult was produced by Sandy Pearlman for many years. I guess a pretty big figure in the rock world, especially at that point in the 80s. He actually heard some of Mark Biederman's playing in the studio and asked him to guest on the Blue Oyster Cult record, which I also believe Joe Satriani did, and a couple other recognizable names. Satriani, by the way, also thanked in our Blind Illusion liner notes. Actually, a lot of familiar names in the Blind Illusion liner notes to distract myself. Trows is thanked. Ler's parents and Les's parents and all their parents are thanked. It said Adam, the bass player, is thanked, so I'm going to guess that's Adam Gates. I think Kehoe got a thanks in there. There was a lot of familiar names. So as expansive and huge as the music scene looks in the Bay Area in the 80s, it's actually seemingly a small world. Sandy Pearlman gets Biederman on the album. In exchange, Biederman is able to get more studio time to continue mixing the album. And this is where I'm going to turn it over to Frankie, because Sandy Pearlman figures in to what I'm going to call the Primus Mystery of the Year.
Just to recap, when they cut the album with Les and Larry, they were adjacent to Blue Oyster Cult. Sandy Pearlman asked Mark Biederman to guest on the album. In return, Mark got more studio time to mix the Blind Illusion records. this would have been early 88, and Les would have met and handed Primus demos to Perlman at that time. So this connects directly to the controversy that we have been discussing for a couple of months now about those demos that surfaced recently. In terms of the music, the tracks are 100% authentic. I mean, they have the corresponding track lists and they are real. The thing is that these demos prove that we are still far from a comprehensive list of all the Primus demos that exist, because Lefkowitz showed us some, Todd Huth described others, and now we have these ones. But we still don't know what is the complete list of demos, and most importantly, what they looked like. So this is where I'm going to share my theory. I think that those demos that surfaced recently could have been the ones that Les handed over in that year, trying to get Primus signed. However, I don't believe that the artifacts themselves are real. I mean, maybe the tapes are real, but I don't think the artwork is something that Les came up with. And I have 3 reasons to think that. The first one is that that artwork is very unlike Primus. Even the font is directly lifted from the 86 demo. And, they just look like images that could have been taken from anywhere. And we know that this was a period of time where Les was very much into creating the artwork himself for these demos. And this is the case with, Sausage was a drawing done by Link. The demo, the illustration on the 86 demo, was then replicated for Suck on This. What I'm getting at is that there was already a sense of aesthetic within the Primus world as early as that time. So I find it unlikely that they would do something so haphazard, even for a demo.
Well, let's give a little context too. So these demos first appeared on Discogs a few months ago, and the asking price was astronomical, correct?
Yes.
What are they listed for? I can't remember. $1,500 a piece, these 2 tapes?
Something like that, yes. Or I think even more.
And they're purportedly from 84 and 87, 86?
That's the other thing. They were not done by, these tracks and these demos were not done by Les alone. They involved other people, and those people were contacted about the demos. Todd Huth, Peter Levy, and none of them recognized the artwork. I'm sure that if they heard the tracks, they would have flashbacks of recording them, but they were not aware of the art. And I find it very unlikely that they would have participated in the recording and then would have been totally in the dark regarding the presentation of the demos as tapes. I think the real tapes have different artwork. And if Todd is ever able to, have some spare time to dig them up from his stuff, probably we will see that they have radically different artwork. That is my theory. Of course, it's not 100% certain, but I believe that if they didn't recognize them, then it's definitely a red herring.
It is a strange thing that these guys that participated in the recordings, Peter Libby, Todd Huth, were not at all familiar with these demos, given the track titles and the photos that the seller was kind enough to share with us, and also the samples of the music that the seller was kind enough to share with us. We won't play them here out of respect for their wishes, but the other thing that I remember we saw as a red flag were some of the titles. So if we look at the 1984 purported demo, the track list is Prelude to Fear. We know that's the second Primus song that Les ever wrote. And then the second track is called Creating, Example 1. That's a strange name. It's probably it probably turns into the track Recreating, which is on the Sausage record. And then we have Chattering Song, instead of shattering song. Now, in the lyrics, he says shattering song, chattering along. So maybe this is an original title, but at the same time, guys like Soya and Todd were telling us that's not it. Too Many Puppies, by the way, also appears on here, the old double time version. So these the tracks themselves, we've heard snippets and they sound legit, and they, to me, they sound like first generation tapes, as if they came direct from Les, from his demo recordings. The other demo has, and we'll put pictures of the purported artwork and track listing on our socials. Welcome to This World, To Defy the Laws of Tradition, The Pressman, Riddles Are Abound Tonight, and Is It Luck? And we know that those are all older tracks. So this one would be from an 86 demo. But the reason I mentioned Sandy Pearlman and stress that name is the story from The Cellar.
Well, before we move on into that, I just wanted to highlight that, yes, that was the third reason why I think they could not be authentic. The track listing and the names of the tracks.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that when we refer to these tapes as fake, I think a lot of people assumed that the content was also fake, that maybe they were just the live versions of the songs, or they were just snippets. So no, I mean, the tracks are 100% real. I hope that is absolutely clear. Mm-hmm. The problem are the artifacts themselves. That's what I think is not authentic, or at least not 100% authentic. Like I mentioned, the tapes could be real, but the artwork looks kind of homemade, but not in the same way that the other tapes look. I mean, it looks like something that a third person put together, not something that came from Les.
Yeah.
There are some arguments going on the internet about them. And I just want to express that I don't have any personal issue with The Cellar. I mean, he was extremely generous in sharing the samples and talking with us about the tapes since he got them. And I have discussed with him the possibility that the artwork is not real, even if the tracks themselves are, and he's completely aware of that. If I criticize the items, it's not because I feel jealous that I don't have them. I mean, I have other things that make me feel extremely satisfied. So I don't lose sleep over these ones.
Do you think you could trade one of your Primus condoms for these demos?
That would be interesting. I mean, I would be very interested in getting to the bottom of the situation. However, I stand by my perspective until we have further evidence or information about the artwork of these tapes. I will just repeat that it's kind of alarming that the people involved with them did not recognize them as authentic.
Mm-hmm. A source of consternation. And just to get back to the Sandy Pearlman thing, the narrative that we have from The Cellar, who has these priced at $1,500 a piece on Discogs, the Cellar did say that they came from the estate of Sandy Pearlman, Blue Oyster Cult producer, among other bands. And it says the tapes were among about 100 demos by all kinds of bands. And it would make sense that you'd want to get your demo in the hands of Sandy Pearlman if he discovered Blue Oyster Cult or was producing them and other bands. The Cellar mentions The Clash. So you'd want to get your demo in his hands if he's hanging out in the Bay Area. So that all tracks for me. I couldn't tell you about that cover artwork. And in a way, I don't really care. I kind of just want the audio, but at the same time, I don't want to pay $1,500 a piece. So,
and I mean, even if we obtain the audio, we are still missing the audio from several other tapes. So
that's right.
I'm beginning to resign myself to the fact that we may not have a comprehensive Primus demo collection until it is released officially by Les Claypool.
Or as kids 40 years down the road.
Yes.
When they find the hidden vault containing all of those tapes. So that's to me, that's the Primus mystery of the year, if not of all time. Where are all these demos? What are all these demos and what do they contain? That was our aside for the Primus Mystery of the Year. Demos, contents, when, where, how, who made what, and finally, where the hell are they now? Email us, primustrackspod@gmail.com, and let us know. Maybe you have a Primus demo we haven't heard yet. I'm trying to channel my inner Robert Stack here, Frankie, for could it be you?
And I mean, we have a precedent. We have a precedent because listeners have cleared up Primus mysteries on previous occasions.
You could solve a mystery. Let's get back to the Sane Asylum. We're only going to talk about it briefly. Once again, these are not songs created by Les Claypool and Larry Lalonde. However, they do perform all over the album. And in fact, I should tell you, Frankie, it's 8 tracks. Les only plays bass on 6 of them. Biederman does bass on the other 2. So I don't know if Les was unavailable, hadn't learned the track, or what the case was, but he's really only on 6 tracks here. As I mentioned before, the songs go back to 1979 when these guys were in high school. Les has the co-writing credit on Death Noise, and really to me, that's one of the more interesting tracks. The other thing I want to point out is this band was labeled hippie thrash. I don't know what that means, because when I listen to it, I hear pretty straightforward thrash. I hear some prog elements, but I do hear some experimental elements. So I suppose maybe that's where the name came from. Based on some other statements made in the book by Adam and others, I think there was a lot of ingestion of cannabis as well as LSD. So maybe that's where the hippie thrash thing comes from. They were doing a lot. But I will say this is an interesting artifact in the sense that Les, although he says in the book, my involvement in Blind Illusion has been overblown over the years, he does say that this was influential as far as the sound and attack and what they were going for when they went in to record Frizzle Fry. So he makes the example of Too Many Puppies, which used to be double time, and you can hear it on those old demos. And he says, well, and then Tim just came in and played it at half speed, and we basically made it a heavy song. So some of his attack and phrasing, and even probably some of his writing on Frizzle Fry was probably influenced directly by this Blind Illusion experience because it wasn't too far in the past for him. But it's also, Frankie, really cool to hear a different tone on that Carl Thompson 4-string bass. I'm going to show you guys that picture on the back of the record again. You can't mistake that original 4-string that Les is holding right there. Clear as day, right, Frankie?
Yes.
Also, there's Ler's Fender. I'm trying to center it. There it is right there, that 600-pound beast. So they were banging on those guitars for a long time before they got together in Primus and did their thing. Kirk Hammett mentions that Biederman was in creative control, and Les was probably better off doing his own thing because he had big plans and a creative vision of his own. Now, some of their creative vision coalesced, and you can hear it in certain spots on this record. However, Kirk mentions a track called Pinstripe Man that Les had worked out for Blind Illusion, but
yes,
Kirk said it just didn't work. So that one's out there in the ether too somewhere. There's got to be some.
What does that mean, by the way?
Pinstripe? So,
yes.
I don't know how familiar you are with sports uniforms, but anytime I think of pinstripes, I think of the New York Yankees baseball jerseys. It's the white jersey with the thin blue stripes vertically.
Okay,
down.
but it could be like a jacket or a suit, or it's like exclusively a baseball outfit.
Oh no, it's a fashion term. So pinstripes are those really thin stripes, and I don't know why they're called pinstripes, but just linguistically, I would guess because they're like the width of the head of a pin. They're very narrow.
So it could be a guy dressed like a gangster.
Now I know what I'm doing for Halloween next year. Thank you. That's perfect. Yeah, those pinstripe suits from the gangster era. That would have been... I should have known that would have been more your speed, Frankie. What the fuck was I thinking? I should have said, think about Al Capone and his sweet suits. But who knows where the hell that one is? That's got to be out there somewhere.
We know that it was recorded.
Oh, yeah, but we don't know onto what. Whether it was a Blind Illusion demo, a Primate demo, or just some tapes that Les made for himself. I don't know. So it could be somewhere in somebody's basement.
We'll find out in 20 years or so.
That's right. Frankie's working his way into the estate, you see, and he's going to his name's on a bunch of documents. But to me, there's a lot of prog influence and obviously metal influence on this record. But I think on Death Noise, I hear some Iron Maiden. I'm going to play a little bit of Death Noise here and there. In general, though, the record really does push some musical boundaries. Mark Biederman's a hell of a guitar player. He's writing some really interesting songs. And it's kind of a shame that Blind Illusion didn't continue consistently for a bunch of years, because I think they would have found their audience. And I think I referred to it earlier in the episode. They got things back together, albeit with a different lineup. Mark Biederman, the only constant there. And they have been recording, and I would assume touring, even as recently as these past couple of years. So Biederman's still plugging away at it, and good for him. As far as this record goes, the production values, I think, suffer from the typical approach of the period. It's not incredibly dynamic as far as the range that you would get from the sound. It does feel a bit boxed in, and once again, a lot of metal records from that time feel boxed in. So that's not too much of a detriment. If you're a Primus completist, Les or Ler completist, you'll definitely want it. If you really like thrash metal, I think you would like this record. I'll play a few clips here from Death Noise, which is credited, as far as the songwriting, to Les Claypool and Mark Biederman. It can be hard. It can be a little difficult to hear the bass in spots, but I'm going to try to pick spots where Les is doing some pretty wild fills and stuff underneath the guitars. Beat, and that's actually it's like really upbeat and fun sounding. So this one I really like because it moves, and it's got a nice pace to it and a nice sound to it. There are a couple of spots though where Les gets some really wonderful opportunities to show off his chops. I'm going to see if I can find one of those for you, Frankie. I'm only picking the spots where he doesn't get these fills. Let's see if I can find another one here. I think it's near the beginning of the track. This part near the beginning, Frankie, I feel Steve Harris being channeled by Les here. So listen to that bass, which is very mid-rangey, actually. Not too far off what you hear from Les nowadays. So there's some really cool stuff. There's a lot of really great parts in this particular track, and I think they mesh together pretty well. Hope you got to hear some of Les's fills going on underneath there, because he's
I did. I mean, and it's great, but it's very peculiar that it's Les completely adapting to something. It's not idiosyncratic at all.
Right. You don't really get his unique voicings, but you can really hear the energy that he's bringing to this track. Now, he does have a songwriting credit on this one, but once again, it's with Biederman, so it's not a 100% Les Claypool vehicle at this point. So that's your point. I take very well there. It's high energy. It sounds like a lot of fun, and it definitely rocks, but it's definitely not the Les Claypool that we know or would come to know just a year or two later with something like the Sausage Demo. I'll play a little bit more of Death Noise near the middle of the track here. This is a long-ass track. Here we go. So I think with better production, and I know, you're limited when you're an up-and-coming band, but I think with a more modern sound, this record would really kick ass. Like I said, if you're a collector of this kind of thing, I think you'll like it. If you want to hear everything Les Claypool or Larry Lalonde or Tim Alexander ever did, well, you get plenty of Les and Ler on this one. You even get credits for the guitar solos, so you can pin down which ones are Larry's and which ones are Biederman's, so you can listen, just go, oh, there's Ler. Yes, I hear the Possessed influence here, and I also hear his work with Blizzard and or whatever it might be. So you get a lot of proto-Primus type stuff in here. And then you listen to Frizzle Fry, and most of it goes out the window. If that makes any sense to you, Frankie.
Yes, absolutely.
So this one not in regular rotation for you, I imagine.
Not at all.
It is kind of a curious piece. For me, I'm sitting right next to the vinyl sleeve here. I will tell you, Frankie, I bought this on eBay in about the year 2000, and I have played it this many times. Mostly because I don't own a record player, but I've played it 0 times. Thankfully, it's there on YouTube, and of course, you can pick up reprints of the CD. It's been reprinted a couple of times over the years. Once again, Les did say too much has been made of his involvement in this project, but to me, it's a key ingredient in his approach to things like, especially in Frizzle Fry and even Seize a Cheese to a degree. But think about this, Frankie. Without Blind Illusion, would we ever have gotten Larry Lalonde and Primus?
Exactly. Every little step matters.
Now, we know the Bay Area scene was pretty small, and they might have crossed paths in some other way, but I'm ever so thankful that it happened this way, given what we have on this timeline. Put me in a straitjacket, Sane Asylum, because you've been tracked, sort of. Next time, Frankie, we're going to take a trip to 1993 to Prawn Song Records headquarters.
Fantastic. I wonder if they were using Comic Sans since then.
Oh, don't even. I just played a card game the other day that had a Comic Sans card in it, and it was printed in Comic Sans. Like, somebody played the card, and I was so sad. And then it turned into a 10-minute discussion about why Comic Sans is either really fun or the worst font ever created. And I'm sure you know what side I was on. So that was a good time. But we're going to talk about Prawn Song Records, 1993. Les decided, hey, I'm going to start a record label. If I recall from the book, Lefkowitz said, not the best idea in the world, but you do you. So we're going to talk about records by Charlie Hunter, a band called Eskimo, Alphabet Soup, Porch, Merv. I'm sure there's one I'm missing, but I have them all, and we're going to listen to a few tracks from each. Sausage is coming in January, so make some room in the fridge. At Primus Tracks, Instagram, Twitter, primustrackspod@gmail.com, patreon.com/Primus Tracks. Speaking of Patreon, we need to thank our patrons. They get their monthly thank you. If you'd like a monthly thank you for supporting us, that is one of the many perks of signing up over at patreon.com/Primus Tracks to support Frankie and myself as we take you on this journey through the Primus universe. Disclaimer, you can take your own journey through the Primus universe. You don't need us. So let's thank our patrons, Frankie. We have... You asked last time, Frankie. This is why I'm laughing. Our newest patron, Stephanie Wolfgang King. Stephanie!
Wow.
Women in the Patreon.
Girls. Wow.
What's up, girls? We also want to thank Eric Forwork. Thank you very much. Alex Delazio. Chad. Carl Reinsch from the Spent Poets website. Travis in Alaska.
Ow, my pal.
Andrew Moran. Mike Chillian. Hi, Mike. Sarah Markham. She was our first bonus podcast guest, and she was fantastic. Frank Pomus. Thank you, Frank. Jesse Colton. Porter Kropf, the next generation of Primus aficionados. Brian Sanford. Thank you to Anthony Del Preet. Frankie's pal, The Cretin. John Shreve. Thank you to David Fraser Crane. Johnny Perona. Good talking to you again, Johnny. He got to hang out with my old college friend the other day. How embarrassing for me. Mr. Funknificent, thank you, sir. Michael Andrews, Juhani Coho, Stephen Stang, Brian Keelb, Chris, Simon Altman all the way over there in Australia, Mike Tuckerman, Daryl Judd in the wilds of Canada, Sculligan Val, Yumi Kashi, Chris Gentile, thank you so much, Keith Thompson, Kevin Lalowski, Amber Porter, and our very first patron, Carlos Arizmendi.
Thank you.
I also want to thank Carlos because he always throws Spanish slang at me, Frankie. My latest and greatest is payasada. I love it. So anytime...
Carlos is cool.
Yes, he is. So anytime the students misbehave, I say, what is this payasada? And they have no idea what I'm talking about. But it's entertaining for me.
I just remember, Josh, I do have 2 bits of miscellaneous debris. I don't know how unorthodox it would be to do them at the end of the episode.
Whoa, you are just blowing my world apart. But let's do it. Let's see what happens. Miscellaneous debris, Frankie, late edition.
Piece number 1, thanks to everyone who helped us reach 3,500 followers on Instagram. That is crazy. I mean, that is kind of influencer territory in Primus terms.
Right?
Oh,
does that mean we get to start modeling skin creams?
We get to start modeling. We get to start sponsoring stuff. We get to start getting free things. Yes.
Oh, great. I can't wait for a bunch of razors to show up.
And miscellaneous debris number 2. How freaking exciting is it, Josh, that the Frog Brigade is coming back?
Oh, holy crap-olo, we didn't even talk about that.
For at least one show. And speculation about possible set lists is very interesting. Some people are discussing Whales and Woe tracks coming back. Maybe Holy Mackerel tracks making an appearance. I think with Frog Brigade, everything is possible, but I can definitely see them doing several tracks of Purple Onion, which had been gathering dust for many years. I mean, Buzzards of Greenfield is pretty much guaranteed, right?
It better come back just for you.
Yes. And it would be, it would be really fascinating to see if they bring back Ding Dang, because Les actually addressed that track in an interview recently. And you never know. I mean, what approach would the Frog Brigade have this time, now that it would be influenced by Bastard Jazz? Is it going to become even more freeform? Are the jam vehicles going to be, longer beyond anything that we have experienced before? Are they going to play the songs kind of similar in structure to the album versions because it's a festival? I mean, It's fascinating. You never know what is going to happen with a Frog Brigade concert.
I'm calling 20-minute Dee's Diner right now.
Dee's Diner is certainly a contender for being the closer, right? That was a Frog Brigade tradition.
And with the Frog Brigade name, you got to imagine some of those original frogs are coming back, band members. But it's all up in the air. Nobody knows anything yet, and I appreciate that air of mystery that they're playing Summerfest in the great state of Illinois at the end of May 2023, and 6 months out, we know nothing. So they're giving us a lot to chew on and speculation time.
Absolutely.
And, what that means down the road, Frankie, is bragging rights when you call everything exactly.
Exactly. I'm incredibly excited about the notion of Frog Brigade coming back. And I even noticed some people trying to find hints in the name of the band. But, from my perspective, it doesn't matter if it's the Fearless Flying Frog Brigade, if it's Colonel Claypool's Frog Brigade, if it's Les Claypool and the Frog Brigade, because even Les himself referred to it in an interview as the Frog Ensemble or whatever. That's what he called it. So the name is kind of interchangeable, right?
Perhaps it's moot, but there have to be clues within there somewhere. I mean, the frog lineup changed all the time, so
all the time.
Pick your guys. Pick an instrument. Who's on keyboards? Who's on this? Who's on that? It will be fun to speculate all the way up till we actually learn something.
I mean, even Tim Alexander could be part of the Frog Brigade.
I'm in. Let's do it. Jack Irons, Tim Alexander, Moby Dick, make it happen.
Yeah, 2 drummers. Amazing.
Well, we'll leave you with that, guys. Give us your best Frog Brigade predictions over on the socials.
Thanks, guys. Let's speculate about the Frog Brigade.
Later days.
Willie Mays.